What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the GDP Podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Della Penna. Already at episode 5, and it's been really cool for me to see the foundation start to be built for this podcast and what it's going to look like moving forward, and getting a lot of great feedback as well. You know, one of the reasons why I started this podcast to begin with was for my love of interviewing and to maybe have another skill in my tool belt that I can use moving forward that isn't a day-to-day part of my job with the CAA or with my other freelance opportunities that are more broadcast based, where I am doing play-by-play or sideline reporting or studio hosting or in-arena hosting now with the Sabres, that I don't really do sit-down conversations through Zoom in my day-to-day life anymore, and how that could be beneficial for me moving forward. So I'm already seeing growth in my level of question asking. I love doing research and getting background on people and trying to get in their frame of mind and how their journey progressed. And you see that in this episode with somebody who I've gotten to know over the last few years in the broadcasting realm, whose career is really skyrocketing. And he deserves it because he's one of the nicest guys ever. Emmanuel Berbari, who currently is a college basketball play-by-play broadcaster, but again, is kind of known a little bit more for what he's doing in one of the biggest media markets in the world with WFAN. It's a huge radio station in New York City, and his coverage with the New York Yankees at just 26 years old. So we go through his entire journey from starting as a teenager in the broadcasting realm, going to Fordham, and again, just continuing to see his involvement in this career. It's been awesome for me to see. And he talked to me afterwards, and it was really nice for me to hear as well, because he wasn't even just the first person to tell me that. It's now a consistent pattern after bringing guests onto the show that it's rewarding for me to have this podcast and to be able to talk with individuals who I either know really well, or hopefully we're going to continue to see over time, other people that this might be my first conversation with them. And it's a networking tool for myself with other athletes, coaches, sports broadcasters that I previously didn't even know, other media professionals as well. But all of the feedback that I've gotten thus far after these interviews is, wow, how fulfilling it was for them to be interviewed and to kind of recap their journey at whatever point they're at in their careers. And I think that's really special because specifically in the sports broadcasting realm, we are so forward thinking. We're thinking about the next opportunity and how we can get to the next opportunity and grow from there and utilize where we're at. And it's never thinking back to, wow, I made this decision. I was at a crossroads in a very decisive time, and it worked out for me. And to take pride in how far you've came over a certain amount of time. Like, we just don't do that, because if you do that too much, it could negatively impact you, but none of us really give ourselves the grace that we deserve because we're our biggest critics. So that's something that is really rewarding to me as well, that I can provide an avenue for not just Emmanuel here today, but anybody who comes on to take a step back and say, wow, I didn't remember that minute detail of when I was in that situation 3-4 years ago, that when you asked me that question, it brought me right back into that frame of mind. I think that's really unique. I think it also is showing that this show has deeper sort of rooted questions, and it's not just base level, recaps of someone's journey, right? Like, we're really digging deep, and I guess we'll see where that takes us. But without me rambling even more in this episode, I know you want to hear more about Emmanuel's amazing story to how he's gotten to the pinnacle of not just Major League Baseball with the New York Yankees, but also at WFAN. So without further ado, here's my guy, Emmanuel Berbari. Alrighty, everybody. Today I'm with one of the most genuine guys I know in the business, have gotten to know him over the past few years, and he just wrapped up a very long and grueling New York Yankees season as he was heard all year long on WAFN. He makes regular appearances on SNY, and you're about to hear him throughout the college basketball season. My guy, Emmanuel Berbari, thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me and the incredibly kind words. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you as well. So, like I just mentioned, just kind of finished up the MLB year. Have you had time to process what this first full season was like? Because you've been kind of part-time over the last 2 years, but now 162 games plus the postseason. I bet it's kind of nice now that you get to catch your breath.
Yeah, I was curious going in what the full 162 would be like because I'd never been through it before. And the last couple of years, as you were alluding to, series here, series there, you're in a regular capacity, but not this regular where you're there every day. So I was really curious how that would all play out. And it was a blast. What I found really fascinating about the end of the season was you're in this every day, and there are parts of the season where, as they call the dog days for the players, not that what we do is anything close to what the players are doing out there, but you get to August and the team was struggling a little bit at the start of August, and you wonder, oh, could they vamp it up for the stretch run? They do end up vamping it up, and they finish on this incredible note. So all of a sudden, everyone has this breath of fresh air entering the postseason. So it's almost like opening day once you get to game one of the wild card series against Boston. And you don't know for any team that's in the postseason how long that playoff run is going to last. You're in a playoff run until you're not. So once you get out of game four of the division series against Toronto and the season's over, you go from all this possibility and we could be here for another month to it's done. And it got a couple weeks, not off. I'm still working a little bit, but much less than I was a few weeks ago. I find that dynamic of the baseball season really interesting, where you're working every day, then it comes to a screeching halt, and you do have time to reflect and think about the season and some of the moments that maybe you overlook when you go through the everyday. I look at it like every day is a new game, and you're just focused on the storyline of that day and bringing your best. But when you come to a finish, you look back and think of some of the high moments and the low moments for the team. And it's a cool process to sort of reel all that in.
Yeah, it's a really unique perspective and dynamic as well, like you mentioned, going from full go for however many months to then right now a little bit of downtime. But before we kind of go deeper into your run with the Yankees, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of your sportscasting career. When did you kind of find that itch when you were younger that, hey, this is something I kind of want to try and maybe pursue as a career?
Yeah, so funny enough, I had no idea this is what I wanted to do. And I found it out at a pretty early age. By 13 years old, I knew it's what I wanted to do. But entering, 12, 13 years old, eighth, ninth grade, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So it happened pretty quickly, where one of my friends was launching a live video streaming program at our high school, which have become, I guess, commonplace now, where you have a bunch of amazing TV stations, radio stations on high school campuses. But that just wasn't the case where I was growing up at Harbor Fields High School on Long Island. And one of my best friends teamed up with our journalism advisor, Mr. Ambrosio, and they started this video streaming program where they were going to stream all sorts of events, whether it be sports, board of ed meetings, concerts, etc. And one December, I remember it was a cold December day back in 2013. My friend just wanted a helping hand. And yeah, you're a high school student. You just want to fit in with your friends. So you go and for the sake of hanging out. I had no idea it's what I wanted to do, but they needed an announcer. So I hopped on the mic and I did a random high school basketball game. And you know how they talk about the aha moment? Something just clicked there. Or, oh, this is super cool. I think I realized in the coming days that whenever I watch a sports game, I was just as interested in what the announcers were saying as the game on the field. And I never quite put that together until I called physically my first basketball game. So from that point forward, the realization of when I'm watching these games, all I care about not all I care about, but a lot of what I care about is what the announcers were saying. And I was super analytically breaking it down. I knew it's what I had to do. And I just poured everything I could into getting as many reps as I could in high school. You have to be really bad at it before you could get at least somewhat good. So I think back to those high school games, like, whoa, I was really going in blind and just did as many games as I could. I went to a broadcasting camp after my freshman year of high school at Chaminade, which is 30 minutes away, private school on Long Island. And the guy who ran that camp, Mr. Reichart, Fordham alum, and he introduced us to a bunch of professionals in the industry. That married a lot of it together. We're like, oh, if these guys could do it, that's super inspiring. And you tried to stay in touch with those people. He took us on a trip to Fordham and WFUV. So that's when I fell in love with Fordham and all I had to offer, and knew that's where I wanted to go to school. So those are the early makings of the journey, where that dream, that spark, was initiated in high school during that basketball game, and then the camp sort of brought it all together.
And even regardless of your skill level when you're in high school, how pivotal was it to have those early reps and get some of those growing pains out of the way so that when you do go to Fordham, you're a little bit more seasoned and ready to go?
Yeah, it's funny because now I look back at Fordham and I think how bad I was when I was at Fordham, but I was so much better than I would have been had I not gotten those reps early on. I think comfort behind the mic is the way I would put it. When you start out in this business, just being comfortable, talking behind a mic, expressing yourself, having conviction in what you're saying. I think command is such a big part of it. And then being comfortable listening back to yourself. Like, I think a lot of the people maybe I started out with at Fordham were just in those early stages of, getting critiqued and listening back to their work and getting feedback. And as you know, Griffin, that process is huge. And also knowing how to take some constructive criticism. And I had done that for a few years going into Fordham. So it wasn't startling for me to have my tape ripped apart or picked apart when I started at Fordham. So I think that was a super awesome growth process for me, starting out from 13 years old, and then carrying that into Fordham, where you start to learn a little bit more of the nuances and the X's and O's of what you're doing, and also starting to showcase your personality a little bit more. But I would say just in terms of comfort behind the mic, those early experiences in high school were everything.
You're wearing, the people who are watching on YouTube, a little Fordham swag here today. It's a program that I think nationally doesn't get the recognition that it deserves for some of the prominent alums that it's pushed out and just the experience that it offers. So why was it the best place for you? It's kind of close to home, but still just really provides an amazing opportunity being in New York.
So I'm glad you mentioned the proximity, because that's where I would start with Fordham and what it meant for me. Obviously goes without saying, the track record, the alumni, the lineage, you're proud to be a part of that. And I've always looked back at that experience. Everyone's just looking to uphold that standard and not slip. Like when you have guys like Mike Breen and Michael Kay and Ryan Rucco that you're looking up to, just to name a few of them, it's on you to carry that torch the best you can and make sure that standard remains at least somewhat the same while you're on campus. But being so close to home, I wanted a place that was close to home, but I could also have a college experience at, still be on a college campus and go through all of that. And I thought Fordham was the best mixture of it all. And when I was lucky enough to intern at WFAN after my freshman year at Fordham, that was a summer internship in 2018. That was a springboard. I look back at it as a springboard to everything else. And being so close to New York City, where I could not only intern there, but when they wanted to bring me on part-time for some producing shifts and tape op shifts after my freshman year, I was right there. Like my fall semester the following year, my spring semester the following year, it's not like I had to say no to anything. Not that I wanted to say no, but I wasn't hamstrung. I could go from class to train ride downtown and work an overnight shift if I needed to. And then you just sacrifice the sleep. Like that's totally fine at that stage of the game. I just wanted to work. I wanted to, get my foot in the door somewhere, prove that I was a hard worker. And being at Fordham, it's not like I was in some faraway place where I couldn't take that on. And I think the proximity was everything there. And then Fordham, you're lucky enough to have that access since FUV is a professional station. They cover the Yankees, the Mets, the Giants, the Jets, Knicks, Nets, etc. And you get credentials as a professional beat reporter. And that experience being local and how to conduct yourself amongst all these beat reporters with years of experience, how to, not say too much or do too much, but also absorb as much as you could and lean on them wherever you felt was not obtrusive. That was something that I thought was, immeasurable. So between the internship at FAN and the beat reporting experience, the proximity was everything with Fordham.
That's something I've always really admired about you, is how you go about the relationship aspect, making connections so important to this business. And we don't really have to go so deep into that aspect, but how did you realize maybe through those experiences at Fordham that, hey, if I utilize some of these relationships now, that maybe a few years down the line, that, yeah, they can kind of be used to my advantage and help me continue to grow in my career?
Yeah, I think it all starts with coming at it from, as genuine a place as possible when you start and not expecting anything. Yeah, I think sometimes when people go about making relationships, it starts with, what that person can do for you and a little bit more transactional. And I think you got to just look at it like you're talking to another human being. Of course, I'm a little bit in awe when I'm talking to some of my broadcast idols, and you're never going to lose that admiration. But it's another human on the other end, and you want to, be as deferential as possible, but not expect it to turn into anything. You just want to come at it from a place rooted in your broadcaster trying to get better, and there's somebody who's done it. So leaning on them for advice and feedback, then going back to them for advice and feedback. And I think a lot of my, what I look at as my healthiest relationships in the industry probably are, I leaned on them for advice and then leaned on them for more advice, and they saw the improvement. And then I became somebody they wanted to, I guess, if you will, invest in or help out. But that didn't come from me asking for it. It was just something that organically grew. And then all of a sudden, maybe you're up for a job or a position and you just call them for advice. And how would you approach this job interview? And then there's somebody who wants to pick up the phone and go out of their way to make a call on your behalf. And I think that's something I never wanted to come off as somebody who was just looking to get from point A to point B. It was more so, how do I improve? And then a lot of people, I feel really lucky, were generous enough to go out of their way to help out.
Yeah, and that's, again, so important to have those advocates on your behalf, and again, commending you for doing it the right way. And great advice for anybody else who's trying to break into the industry, of that's more of the way to do it instead of the transactional approach. So you're at Fordham, you're killing it, you're doing great, you graduate, and it's always the really hard time for young professionals who are trying to break in, that are just scraping to get any piece of experience that they can on the mic, going to different schools and freelancing. How did you navigate that? Again, being in the New York City area, there's a lot of opportunity, but still few and far between to try to get to that next level.
Yeah, it's something I juggled when I came out of school. What's the right path necessarily? Because I wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster. I was open to a lot, but I wanted to do play-by-play. That's where the passion and the fire lied coming out of Fordham. And the opportunities in play-by-play, you're right, you could piece together a freelance schedule in New York City, but it's not like we're in the SEC here, where there are these high-level, amazing productions all over the place, and you're not getting a steady dose of work necessarily. So reps are reps, but I was wondering, where's the right next opportunity? And I was willing to freelance and piece it together for as long as possible. I was wondering, could I do that? And then could I, work at FAN hand in hand? I was lucky enough to have that part-time opportunity behind the scenes built in from when I was still a student. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I just go down that road and try to give that a shot. But it was a unique time in that COVID was the summer before, and I was going to do the Cape Cod Baseball League as a junior going into a senior in college. And for those who don't know that are listening, the Cape Cod Baseball League, if you want to be a baseball broadcaster and you're going through the college broadcasting ranks, sort of like a baseball player prospect, if you're a broadcaster, you want to get in any way, shape, or form and do that summer, get those reps, and it's a magical experience on Cape Cod. But I was going to do it going into my senior year at Fordham, and then the world comes to a stop. So I didn't know whether I should do that, whether there was a different baseball opportunity out there. You're also graduating in May. So if you're going to do a full season affiliated minor league baseball team, that probably starts in March. So if you graduate in May, that doesn't really add up. So I was fortunate enough where Chatham, the Cape Cod Baseball League team that I eventually did, and Dan Duva, who runs that program, great Fordham and Syracuse grad, he generous enough, hey, come back and do it as a graduating senior. So I'm great. I can spend a couple months on the Cape, get that experience, that baseball play-by-play experience, and then figure out the fall when we get to the fall. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't have a few thoughts of what the fall would look like. But now that I look back at it, that was like my broadcasting grad school. Going to the Cape Cod Baseball League and under the tutelage of somebody like Dan and doing all those games, it was invaluable experience. And then I came back in the fall, and it just so happened that there was a management change at WFAN, and I was working behind the scenes shifts when I came back from the Cape Cod Baseball League, and was just going to continue that for as long as possible as I looked for the next play-by-play job. And they just so happened we're looking for new voices to try out on the air doing an overnight shift. And one of my bosses walked up to me in the newsroom while I was preparing to do a midday producing shift. I was like, how would you like to, host overnight on August 31st? I'm like, what? Host overnight? And I was floored. Like, that was the biggest break of my life that just happened at a moment I never expected it to come. And I think that all stemmed from, if I just started there and I was 21, 22 years old, you probably don't look at that guy to do an on-air shift. But I had interned there 4 years ago, and I had a few years working behind the scenes. So maybe there was a trust level that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And I did that one shift with no guarantee of what was to come. But that was the basis for everything that's come since then, and just happened a couple weeks after I came back from the Cape in 2021.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I didn't even know it was that close in between where you started. Right. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention for the basketball season, when that rolls around, initially how we met was through the MAC and your time with Siena. And you drive for all of your games from New York City to Albany. And that, for people that aren't really good with maps or location, that's a very far way. How did that also come to fruition? And why did you feel like that opportunity to be with the Saints be so valuable, and again, continue to get reps as a play-by-play broadcaster?
So it's a great question, because in the chronology of where we are, Cape Cod after Fordham, the first show on FAN after Fordham, then Siena comes about, and I see the job opening and I figure, oh, this is perfect. We're not talking about freelancing a schedule together. We're talking about being, the voice of a team, the voice of a school. And I thought the reps would be so fruitful, and you're doing a little bit of radio, a little bit of TV. So I saw the job posting. I'm like, I got to go after this. And I put in for it, but I really didn't know anybody in the MAC. So this as well as I do. You're sort of just another application at that point. And I'm wondering, will I hear back? Will I not hear back? And fortunately, through FAN, Bob Husler, who's the voice of Fairfield, the longtime voice of Fairfield, and he was a great mentor of mine at that stage. I just asked him, I'm like, did you hear anything about the Siena job coming open? And he was like, no, I didn't hear about that. But you know what? I know I've known Mike Demos for years. Let me talk to him. And another example of, like, I didn't ask him to make that call, but Bob, being the generous, amazing human that he is, went out of his way to call Mike on my behalf. And that got me and Mike on the phone. I'd already called Mike once and we had a conversation. That was just an initial call with the job opening. But then we get to talking more, and we never labeled it a formal job interview, but I got on a Zoom with Mike and was curious. All right, like, maybe this has a shot of happening. And eventually Mike called me back and said, I'd like to see if you'd be interested coming on as, voice of the Saints. And I said, oh, that'll be awesome. Like, is that a job offer? He's like, yes, that's a job offer. And that's how it came about. I still wanted to check with my bosses at the Fan because I had just gotten my first few shows at WFAN, and I'm thinking, I don't want to mess this up. Like this could be something here, but it was irregular. It was once or twice a month. So I brought it up to them, and they were so super supportive. And I thought that was almost, I didn't have to advocate for being a play-by-play guy at the Fan. I could just say, hey, I have this opportunity at Siena. Would you mind if I, did some Siena? And they thought it was perfect. So that was really important for me because I still had to grow. I still have to get better at play-by-play as I'm currently doing. But it was a professional play-by-play experience on top of what I'd done in baseball. And it just kept that in a mix where I could do some talk shows. I could do Siena basketball. I could look towards the next baseball season. And I wasn't pigeonholing myself as one or the other. I was this versatile, talk show, update anchor, play-by-play, and kept everything viable. And letting alone the big picture of the career, I thought, being at a place like Siena and getting entrenched with the MAC and doing a team in a season and the relationships that came from that was just so much fun. And it's still fun to this day, and it's why I still love doing it. So that was the fall of 2021 when Siena came about.
So Siena comes about, you continue to get so well-rounded. Then Hudson Valley comes around, you're continuing to do more baseball. Where did you see that continuement of evolvement, I guess, in your skills to then continue to work your way up at the Fan? Is there maybe watching and observing, oh, wow, Emmanuel, he's starting to really build up a repertoire and his skills are continuing to improve?
I think the Hudson Valley part was probably one of the biggest opportunities because I done Siena and they were aware of that, and I was going to continue doing Siena for as long as possible. But Hudson Valley came at this point where I was wondering, okay, I'm getting more shows at the Fan, but it's still not. And this isn't me complaining. Like I would have been happy with one show at WFAN, but you got to balance. All right, if I'm doing one or two a month versus I want to be a play-by-play guy, should I go and take a minor league baseball job? That's a tough decision. And you're in the biggest market in the world. It's where you've always wanted to work. It's what you dreamt of doing. But the baseball play-by-play reps need to be had if you want to go down that road. So an opportunity actually came up that fall as I started to look and at least explore minor league baseball with the Tennessee Smokies, the Cubs AA team. And I was very close to taking. I had to run it by a few people, and I thought it was an amazing opportunity, but I would have had to leave New York for that chance to be a AA number two. And I like that my bosses at FAN, they didn't really, they knew it was a good opportunity, but they didn't really weigh in. They're like, what you have going here is really good, but what you have there is also really good, and there's no set path. So they sort of left it to me, and it was a flip of a coin almost. I didn't flip a coin to make the decision, but it was 50-50. I turned it down, and that's one of the decisions. Like I never turn opportunities down. Like I hate when I turn opportunities down, but in that spot, I'm like, I feel like there's some momentum here at FAN, and I'm doing Siena, and I'm like, let me hold out, and maybe I get no minor league baseball job, but let's poke around and see if there could be something more local. And that was tough. Like saying no to that. I figured, what if I don't get a baseball opportunity? But I guess things just worked out for a reason where a few months later, probably in the February range, I saw that there was a number two opening in Hudson Valley, and Joe Vasile, who you know from the MAC, who's the number one in Hudson Valley, I had met him through Siena and everything coming together type of thing in this industry. I reached out and just saw if he would be open to talking about the number two, he had already offered it to somebody else when I reached out to him. And he was completely transparent about that. He said, I have an offer up, but we're not sure where it's going to go. Like, let's circle back. And the guy didn't take the job. So I'm not in Hudson Valley, and I'm probably not where I am if that guy takes the job. I don't know who it is, but whoever it was turned the job down. Joe, by chance, reaches back out to me. I talk to him. I get the Hudson Valley job. So we talk about dumb luck. Like, I'm never in Hudson Valley without somebody turning down that number two. And I think that accelerated my timeline a little bit, because then I'm doing minor league baseball. I'm doing it in Hudson Valley, which, is local, but still you have to drive. I mean, that's a 90-minute minimum drive from the city, but it was also a number two position, not a number one. So I could take off at times. There was an hours cap where I could take off and I could do a WFAN overnight while I was still doing the Hudson Valley season. So it's a very uniquely good, for my position, number two. Other minor league baseball jobs, you got to give up one or the other. But I kept both in the mix. And that 2022 summer was the busiest of any summer I've had. Even the 162 I just did, that was busier because I was doing Hudson Valley minor league baseball, WFAN overnights. That's when I started picking up a little bit more steam at FAN, where it wasn't once a month. It was maybe 3 or 4 times a month minimum. I was also doing some update shifts, and there was something going on every day. And some days it was just around the clock where I would do an overnight, go right back up to Hudson Valley and do the game, and then back to the city. So it was all so much fun and worth it. But I look back at that, I'm like, wow, like you spent a lot of hours in the car and a lot of hours of no sleep. But it's really interesting to think about what could have been had I either taken the Tennessee Smokies job or whoever it was took the Hudson Valley job instead of me. So I'm just very fortunate that worked out that way, because I think that put me on the doorstep of, all right, now here's a baseball play-by-play guy in our system doing talk shows. Whenever there's a Yankee postgame opening or et cetera, I could be considered. I never knew it would happen, but at least I was in the process of being considered.
That's the part that I love about your stories. It really is this domino effect and almost culmination of everything transpiring. What was your mindset throughout that time when you're logging all those miles in the car and there are those long nights and just trying to build up enough momentum to be considered for opportunities that you would later get down the road with the fan, for then to that finally happen? What were some of those emotions of, wow, I worked so hard. I've done all of these long, hard hours to get to this point where now my foot's in the door of being in the Yankees system and helping out with their coverage.
Yeah, it was emotional, where I guess there was this blind faith as I was doing those hours in the car and not sleeping. Plus, let's not get it twisted. I mean, when you get an opportunity at WFAN, there are worse places to be, quote unquote, grinding. So I don't want to make it out like, oh, I'm slaving away here or there. Like, you're on the air, it's this golden opportunity. So I guess that pushes you, because you're thinking, oh, how lucky am I to have this opportunity? Of course I'm going to take it. But I think part of it that made it easier and more seamless was you had a great support system in place. I almost viewed FAN as it's this great opportunity, but you have this fabric and these bosses who are supporting you, and you almost feel an investment in your journey. And you're doing all these different gigs, and they're different. So it's fresh. It's a new opportunity to do a talk show versus play-by-play. And I always liked keeping both muscles in your brain active. And I viewed them as totally separate things. So everything being a new opportunity and a new challenge was fun and spiced it up a bit. And then when you get that opportunity, going into 2023, similar to 2022, this jogs my memory that, similar to the Hudson Valley job that may not have ever been, I was wondering what the next summer was going to look like. Hudson Valley was on the table to go back, but it was no longer an hours cap. It was going to be around the clock, to the point where I couldn't have realistically kept doing FAN in the backdrop. I had to choose one or the other. So I said no. I was just at a point where I wasn't willing to give up the FAN stuff anymore, and I was much more firm in that than the summer before. When Tennessee, do you go? Do you not go? No. Now it was I needed to stay in New York. I looked at a couple other jobs. I wondered, can I freelance it together? Can I maybe do a couple filling games at the double or triple A level, but less regular? And a few triple A teams I interviewed for, and they turned me down. And I was getting awfully close to the season and thinking 2023, no baseball. And I was wondering, okay, I'm in a great spot at the station. I really feel like it's progressing, but could this be a setback not having any baseball here in 2023? And literally a week later, my boss calls me, and I'd known that the Yankee postgame job was available because Sweeney Murdy wasn't coming back. But I also knew, look, I got to get really fortunate for this to go in my direction, at least full time. So I wasn't counting on that at all. And it was like a week after one of the minor league teams turned me down that I get a call from my boss. He's like, I got good news and bad news. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, what could the bad news be? He said, the bad news is you didn't get the post game job. I'm like, no worries. Like, I'm thinking, I appreciate being considered. He said, the good news is, Justin Shackle, who's one of my Yankee colleagues, said he's going to need, 40 games off. And he's like, we want you to do that. So I'm like, that's not bad news at all. Like, that's the best opportunity of my life. So that's what's running through my mind. And that was another big break and door opening where now you're part of a major league broadcast and filling in for Justin on postgame. And you talk about the domino effect that led to everything else, where now you're in the Yankee fabric, if you will. You still want to go there and make a good impression and prove what you can do. But by making a good impression, that led to September of 2023. Both John and Susan, timing and luck, they both take the same series off. And Justin and I end up doing play-by-play for Yankees, Pirates, and Pittsburgh. And that's my first big league play-by-play opportunity. Now, you talk emotion. I'm coming back from a trip. I hadn't done a Yankee gig in a couple weeks in August of 2023, just by nature of the 40 games and how they were laid out. I came back from seeing my friend in Charlotte, and I was just catching up with one of my bosses at the Fan. I didn't think it had anything to do with anything. I just thought it was a touch base catch up situation. And I walk into the office and both of my bosses are there. And I'm thinking, what could this be? Like, they're never just waiting for me in the same place at the same time. And they asked me if I've ever been to Pittsburgh. And I said, yes, once. I did a Fordham women's basketball A10 championship at Duquesne back in 2019. And then that's when they get into, here's the deal, like John and Susan are both taking off. We'd love for you to, do the series with Justin. And that was, I mean, we talked about the first talk show, the initial realization that I do 40 post games that year, 30, 40 post games. That was the most emotional, where when I walked out of their office that day, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm about to do a Yankee play-by-play game. I never expect that to happen for years. So that was emotional. And then that's when you reflect a little bit on what it took to get there, because it didn't take a long time. I expected it to be a years-long process, but there were a lot of hours poured in, and there were a lot of long nights on the road. So that was emotional. And, you call your parents and you let them know, and that's very emotional. But that was the first big league play-by-play opportunity, September 15th of 2023.
And you were 24 years old, right?
24 years old. So that was a little surreal to begin with. I'm like, holy bleep, like, I'm 24 years old. I'm about to step into the Yankee radio booth. And it's not just the Yankee radio booth. Like, that carries enough weight in gold, but you're stepping in for two of the biggest legends in the broadcast industry. Like, you're just trying to do it justice that it's John Sterling and Susan Waldman you're filling in for, and not anybody.
So then even the next season after that, John Sterling, what was it, in like May, decides, hey, I'm done
April.
right now. April. Yeah. Super
So
early in the season.
timing and domino effect and luck, as we've talked about with almost everything. Had I not got in the 40 post games in 2023, had I not made a good enough impression where I could do those 3 play-by-play games at the end of 2023, you're not in a spot where early in 2024, John retires and you're right there. So I never take for granted the fact that a lot of me doing the volume of play-by-play I did last year was just being right there. Justin and I were both set to fill in for John on 25 road games going into 2024 because he was scaling back on his travel and he was going to do mostly home games, maybe a couple road games. And we were going to fill in on 25 apiece. And that was amazing. At that stage, I'm like, 25 Yankee games, my goodness. And he decides to hang it up about a week into the 2024 season. And then it becomes more or less a tag team. And Justin and I are splitting all the games that we were initially going to do post game for. All those home games that he then vacated were post games for us. And we just slid over into the play-by-play role. And then there were a couple other factors at play. We had Ricky Ricardo doing some games. We had Brendan Burke do some games. We had Craig Carton did a few games. So there was a rotating cast of characters, but Justin and I probably did the lion's share of the split. And, that was a tremendous opportunity, but a little bit of a whirlwind where it's under the microscope. Everybody's talking about it. There's no hiding from that fact. Every time you showed up to the ballpark, there was some question about, John's role and, who's the next John Sterling, even though you got to keep a very small focus when you're in a position like that. You just have to focus on that night and doing a better broadcast, or else you'll get eaten up by that entire situation. You just have to go there and not think about the gravity too much, but it's hard to hide from the gravity of that position. But yeah, none of that comes about without the position I was set to do entering the season. And then John retires and you're thrust into that higher leverage situation.
Even going back to last year or this past season, how were you able to maybe, again, so early in your career, take some of that doubt that could creep in? I'm so early in my career. Am I ready for this? Maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, and then just be able to tune all of that out and focus on what's at hand that, hey, no, I should have the confidence in myself. I'm in this position for a reason. And again, not listen to maybe some of that negative noise.
It's a good question. I think a lot of it comes down to having, great people who are supporting you and cheering you on, and supportive people around you in that booth, or else it would eat anybody up in that spot, especially at that early stage. There is imposter syndrome. There's no getting around that. I mean, you're in the Yankee booth, you're in John Sterling's seat. It'll always be John's seat, and you're just trying to do that justice. But you also have to be your own person. I mean, nobody's going to be John ever, and that's what made him one of a kind and one of the all-time greats. He's so authentically him. So I just tried to do the best I could every day. And yeah, there is negative noise. There are people on social media, and there are a lot of people who think you don't belong there, and rightfully so. I mean, you're a Yankee fan. You've listened to John Sterling for years. You tune in, you hear this 25-year-old guy who probably shouldn't be there. But you also have to remind yourself, and there were people reminding me of this, and I appreciate them doing it, because there are moments of doubt. You're here for a reason. They're not giving you Yankee games or this volume of Yankee games. I didn't think you could do it. They could just as easily say, look, we're going to go in a different direction. And that's never lost on me. It's still not lost on me. So you just have to believe in yourself and call the game that got you there. You're trying to get better and make tweaks every day, but do the game you know how to do. That's the game they hired you to do. So that's the way I approached it. And like any baseball season, there are moments of doubt. There are moments of, wow, I'm in this really fortunate position. But is this good enough? Am I doing a good enough job? But that's all off the air thoughts. Like once you're on the air, there's no room for doubt. If there's any doubt while you're on the air, you're not doing your job. So if you're prepared, if you're prepped, and you've handled all you can handle on the side. Once you're on the air, it should flow, and it should be that joyous experience of calling a baseball game. And I was very lucky during that season to have some great iconic moments to call. You're in this Yankee season with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto hitting back to back in the lineup. Like, how much better could that get? I called Ben Rice's 3-homer game against the Red Sox as a rookie. So there were some really fun and surreal experiences that came with that. And you ask about maybe some doubt. Those are the experiences that help you through it, where you think, man, I was really lucky to be a part of that. And that's more joy than anything else.
When you look back at your entire baseball career up to this point, where did you feel like you made the biggest strides this past season as you continue to improve, not just on the postgame show, but also in the booth?
Yeah, I think I can tie last year and this year together a little bit in that way. A lot of it came to slowing down, letting the game come to you and seeing the game better. And a lot of people have played a hand in that, but particularly Susan, who was my partner throughout 2024, is one of the all-time greats and has been nice enough to welcome me into this position. And she basically, back in 2024, early stage of that season, I was super keen on leaning on her for advice and feedback. And she almost encouraged me to slow down. And after my first series, basically said, look, it's a long season. There's nothing to critique on 1 or 2 games. There's a long season. The strides you're going to make, you can't critique. It's a 162 game season. So really laying back and letting the game flow and letting the game come to you. Once you do that, and it's easier said than done, and it's a long process, I'm still working towards that, you start to see things in the game and the little details in the game that you would overlook if your brain is rushing or you're thinking to the next pitch and not really on what's going on here, or what is my partner saying, or really letting things slow down. Sort of like if you're talking about a player, like, I'm sure the game speeds up for a rookie. Their heart is beating faster. They're walking up to the batter's box, and I'm sure 95, that's looked like 95 their whole life, might look like 102. So I think for me, it probably looked like 102 initially. And I'm sure how hard I was trying to make it good, it came off as good enough. But to continually do this and get to the point where your perspective is good enough, it's got to continue to slow down. And I think last year there was an improvement of that throughout the season. This year I was really focused on, all right, like, really have command over this, slow it down. And I think when I stepped back into play-by-play this year on a fill-in basis, the game was slower. And it wasn't, I'm sure it'd be even better with more reps, but I felt more like, okay, I'm part of the broadcast team. I'm around it every day. Just trust that you've done this before, stepping in, and you'll see the game on a better level. And I felt there was improvement there, and I'm sure that can continue to grow over time.
As we wrap up here, you continue to diversify yourself. I mentioned that you're doing regular hits on SNY. You're also getting ready for the college basketball season, where last year you did games on Fox as well. Just where's your mindset at? Again, now taking aside how you've made these significant strides with the Yankees, but year round as you are trying to continue to elevate your career.
Yeah, I think it's just approaching every opportunity the same. I look at each game very similarly now, whether it's baseball, whether it's a post game, whether it's a play-by-play game, whether it's a talk show, whether it's a basketball game on radio or TV. You want to be as prepped as you could possibly be, and that's an ever evolving process, as you know. Yeah, I probably do a different. I'm maniacal about this. I'd probably do a different basketball chart in how I prepare for the game every single time. I'm not afraid to rip up my prep and completely change the way I prepare, because I think that's a really important process. You don't want to have meaningless stuff, and not that any prep would be, unimportant, but in the way you layer it, you don't want to have the wrong stuff first or not prioritize things the right way. So each game I'm looking to improve my prep and be as prepared as I can. Each game I'm looking to be a little sharper in the way I call the game. And each game I'm looking to bring the best out of my analysts and whoever I'm working with a little bit better. And each game I'm looking to have a little bit more fun and like showcase a little bit more of my personality. And if I could do those 4 things on each assignment, and I'm at least like I'm never going to be perfect, but if I'm at least like a 7 or 8 out of 10, and then I could try to get to that 9 or that 10 all the time. Like, I feel like that's where I want to be. So I grade myself on that scale, and I've really leaned into, I think the Fox games helped with this a lot last year, because as big a stage as Yankee baseball is, when you're doing a game on, a national network and you're on TV, like that camera is in front of you. So that's a little bit more deer in the headlights than nobody can see you behind a mic on radio. You really got to loosen up, man. You got to not take it seriously at all. And that's easier said than done. I mean, you want to do well and you want to get another opportunity. And that's what we all got to juggle and think about. Like, have fun versus, okay, how do I do a good job so I'll get hired again? But you got to trust that you were almost brought in for a reason. And I think that Fox experience, and it got a lot better last year, like game 1 to game 8, but just have fun and let it flow and let it rip, and like lean into the people you're working with. Like, they're the person who, scored this many points at college or won a national championship. Like, they're here for a reason. Like, lean into their expertise and let them be the star of the show. And that's something I'm continually trying to do. So whether it's baseball, whether it's basketball, it could be a talk show where you're talking with guests or callers, or like really lean into the people you're talking to and be a better listener. And I think the more I do that, the better it'll all become over time.
Well, you're certainly doing things right, because your career is continuing to blossom, and I can't wait to see what's next for you and this long, long career that you're going to have in this business.
Thank you, man. Really nice of you to say. And it's been awesome getting to know people like yourself through the MAC. And I'm excited for, those are the best experiences, when you go through a basketball season and the people you meet along the way. And then it all comes full circle at a place like Atlantic City. So I'm sure we'll be be bumping into each other a lot during this season.
Thank you again for listening to episode 5 of the GDP podcast. A little state of the union, I guess you could say. Things really ramp up for me in terms of travel right now, with our CAA Fall Sports Championships coming up throughout the month of November. But don't worry, we're still going to have an episode a week and try to build a consistent schedule moving forward on what days of the week we're going to continue to have these conversations. But I know that this is really important to me. Hopefully it's becoming a part of your week, where you get to learn about other people in the industry that you might have not known about, maybe heard, but don't really know their background. So again, I really appreciate your support. Continue to be on the lookout for more fun episodes moving forward, specifically with athletes. And again, really love what we're doing here on the GDP podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.